Panel session. First, Mr. Mpata Hamidu from Muteesa Royal University. Please step forward and take your seat. Next we have Mr. Kaka and Angel from Kyambogo University. Representing Uganda Pentecostal University is Mr. Achut Calvin Barnabas. Step forward and take your seat. From Makerere University Business School is Miss Basita Kasfa. And to complete the constitution of this panel is Mr. Ainebiona Marvin from Bishop Stuart University. Before I can make a recap of the rules pertaining to this debate, let me just introduce Mr. Munzila Crispus Namanya, who is an alumni of this exercise and notably the Season 2 champion for the Inter-University Debate Interface. Please stand up for recognition. It's a pleasure to have you with us today. Thank you. So briefly, these are the ground rules. First, the first and last minutes of the respective panelist's speech are protected. Second, in the 8th minute, a panelist may interrupt the other on 2 points. First is the point of information or point of order. The audience will only intervene during the time when the moderator opens up the debate to the plenary. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope we are set. Let us get to the business of the day. The first question is going to be fielded to all of you jointly. Each will have an allotment of 8 minutes to respond, but you note that that is within the context of the rules, which I have earlier highlighted. So the question goes as follows. To what extent has Uganda's colonial legacy influenced democratic practice in Uganda? May I repeat again? To what extent has Uganda's colonial legacy influenced democratic practice in Uganda? The question for consideration by the panelists is, to what extent has Uganda's colonial legacy influenced democratic practice in Uganda? I am going to invite Mr. Mpata Hamidu from Muteesa Royal University to go first.
Thank you very much, our dear modulator. Protocol observed, ladies and gentlemen. Mpata Hamid is my subsequent nomenclature from the mighty Muteesa, the first Royal University, the first Royal University and the only one in Uganda. Ladies and gentlemen, standing before you, speaking about the theme that is clearly being introduced, that is Uganda's unending quest for credible, free, and fair elections. Ladies and gentlemen, every 5 years, the sun rises in Uganda with renewed hope. The hope that this time, the people's voice finally will echo louder. Ladies and gentlemen, the hope that the people's voice will echo louder than the power of the few. After 5 years, when elections take place, we sing as that falls on election day. The hope often fades into a familiar silence. The silence of disappointment, disbelief, and deferred dreams. For over 63 years, ladies and gentlemen, it's important for you to know this before I dive into the question asked to me. For over 63 years since independence, Uganda has not been short of elections. That he has been short of trust. Uganda has been short of trust. From the 1962's promise of self-rule to 1980's betrayal of the ballot, from the gun-smoked referendum of 1990s to the internet shadows of the 2021. Every generation has cried. The more question like a national cross. The question which goes, when will our vote truly count? Ladies and gentlemen, having put that on table, allow me dive into.
Let us listen to the panelists in silence.
Allow me dive into the question being asked. For over 63 years, everyone's cry is, when will our vote truly matter? Uganda's unending quest for free, credible and fair elections, I would like to put this into your consideration. For the 63 years Uganda has got independence, we've never received any free and fair elections on this country, motherland Uganda. From the earlier elections, before even the independence, that is the 1954, 1958, the indirect elections of the British colonial government, when they were choosing representatives on the legico, these were just appointed, which were totally unfree and unfair. When we dive into the 1961 elections, we saw the largest kingdom, that is Uganda, forming 3/4 of the Uganda's population. The lion in the house boycotting the elections, that is 1961 elections. Therefore, that brings us to the constellation that in Uganda, from the very first election we received, they were free and unfair to the current elections that we're always having and that we're going to hold in the 2026. Ladies and gentlemen, the question being asked is, to what extent has Uganda's colonial legacy influenced democratic practice in Uganda? That is the question being asked. To what extent has Uganda's colonial legacy influenced democratic practice in Uganda? When we talk about colonial legacy, my dear colleagues, fellow intellectuals and our esteemed judges, when we talk about colonial legacy, it's important to emphasize that colonial legacy dates from the period of 1954 when Uganda was declared a British protectorate. We saw various policies of the foreign government, of the colonial government, being put into place. We saw colonial legacy like the divide and rule of the British, colonial legacy of the forced intimidation that the colonialists used on the Africans. Just remember, 1954, Igneous Kangave Musazi, he was imprisoned. Why? He was imprisoned because he rose up and demanded for the rights of the indigenous Ugandans. That brings a picture to us that the unfairness that were brought by the colonial legacy is still what we're still inheriting even in the current times. It's important to emphasize that colonial legacy divided Uganda. It divided Uganda into various fragments. This was introduced by the divide and rule policy of the British. We all remember that policy where the British used one region to fight against the other region. They used the Uganda to fight against the fellow brothers and sisters in Uganda. That is the division that were created. This explains why even after the colonialism, that is in the 1961 elections, as we were preparing Uganda for independence, these elections were organized alongside the divisions which were created by the colonialists. Take an example. We saw DP, Democratic Party, being supported by the Catholics. We saw UPC, DP of Benedicto Chiwanuka, being supported by the Catholics. We saw the Protestants supporting the UPC, that is Uganda Post Congress of Apollo Milton Obote. So we are seeing these divisions created by the colonial legacy dividing with the Ugandans to the level that even after independence, no, just remember, during 1962, the post-independence first elections, the first election we held after independence. Still, these divisions were similarly to what affected us, even in the 1962 elections. When Buganda formed an alliance with what? They formed an alliance with UPC of Apollo Milton Obote to fight against the DP. Ladies and gentlemen.
Martha, you have a minute to sum up your submission.
Thank you, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, as I'm bringing this to your attention, please listen to this. The colonial legacy in the very first, it brought divisions among the Ugandans. In the second, the colonial legacy created the Independent Electoral Commission. For example, it's not colonial legacy that created the Electoral Commission, but the commission that supervised the pre-independence election, 1961. It was influenced by the British colonialists. This explains why even in the current times, the Electoral Commission that have been established, they are in favor of the few against the majority. Take an example. Article 60 of the Constitution, 1995 Constitution. It's imitating from the colonial legacy. For example, they established the Electoral Commission, which is supposed to be independent. But however, this is dominated by one lion against the other forest or the other nation. So,
your
ladies
time
and
is
gentlemen.
up. Thank you. Your time is up. May we now hear from Kaka and the Angel.
All right,
From Kyambogo University. I beg your pardon. The question is, to what extent has Uganda's colonial legacy influenced democratic practice in Uganda?
all right. Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone. My name is Kaka and the Angel, and I am from a student of Kyambogo University doing a bachelor's in business administration. So I'll just get to the question, which says, to what extent has Uganda's colonial legacy influenced democratic practice in Uganda? I think the question first needs us to understand what democracy in and of itself is. Democracy, right, is a system of government where the power is held by the people. And there are two systems of democracy that exist. The first one is direct democracy, where voters themselves or citizens of a particular country vote directly for policies and laws that are to be made. In Uganda, we have representative democracy, which we have used ever since we got independence 63 years ago. Democracy in and of itself, regardless of the type, is characterized by basically 2, 3, or 4 things. The first one is ruled by the people. That means power resides within the citizens of a particular state, Uganda inclusive. The next thing is the election of representatives, which I said at the beginning that Uganda in and of itself uses. The second thing is that there should be citizen participation, and that means the public should be involved in all the political process or the electoral process that happens in a particular country. There should also be protection of rights, and all rights in terms of freedom of speech, in terms of freedom of you to probably cast your vote. That is very important. Notice the constitution that we use, and the question which I seek to interrogate is that to what extent has Uganda's colonial legacy influenced democratic practice in Uganda? Now that we have established what democracy is, I'm just going to talk about Uganda's colonial legacy in and of itself. Uganda's colonial legacy looks like one that obviously it started in 1953-54, especially when we had the increase of the number of representatives of Africans on the LegCo, that is the legislative constituency. And also, we had then the first elections that happened in 1951 that were governed by the laws that were made by the LegCo in and of itself. It definitely means we need to look at the characterization of that election and that electoral process and the electoral processes that followed for us to be able to determine the kind of impact, the effect in terms of extent that it has had on Uganda's current electoral process. Listen up. The thing is, in 1961, where Uganda got a constitution and they used this to vote, we had things like people, Uganda in and of itself, boycotting the election. That means when they boycotted the election, I'm going to show you how the other elections were also like boycotted in the coming years that Uganda held elections. In 1962, because of several reasons, for example, Baganda claiming that the then governor, Andrew Cohens, wasn't really respecting their Kabaka, and him being deported in 1954, 1955, that is one of the reasons as to why they chose, and because they had been promised to be given an independent state. That's one of the reasons as to why they chose to boycott those elections. A rough estimate of the number of Baganda that registered for that election were about 400,000, but only 3.4% of that, according to the history that I read, says that they went and voted. It essentially means that they boycotted that election. But that in and of itself doesn't make it illegitimate, as long as the right, and Article 1 says that if you have the right, even in that constitution, the law that governed that election by then, Article 1 says you have the right to either choose to go and vote or choose not to go and vote. That means if the Baganda by then boycotted that election becomes legitimate because it was a personal choice by themselves to boycott that election. It doesn't make it illegitimate because they didn't. If there were other factors that probably didn't make them participate, would call it illegitimate, but that makes it legitimate. Fast forward to 1969 to 1971, right? We had the Amin coup, we didn't have elections going on, and then fast forward to 1980, that's when we had our first election after the UNMLF removed the then dictator Amin from power. It means, and that election essentially was governed by Mwanga. Mwanga himself was a UPC loyalist. Aside from him being a UPC loyalist, he said, and I quote, that anybody that goes and declares the results of those elections commits treason, and he was an army official. I'm also going to show you that at the end, right, in status quo right now, the soldiers, and this is like one of the extents that I'm going to talk about, the characteristics that you have in those elections that happened during that time up to 1986 and then 1991. The first one is the army involvement. It has always been there. The reason as to why Milton Apollo Obote won the first elections that happened is because he had the support of the army. In 1980, Mwanga was an army officer, and he's the one who declared the results of those elections. For us to change power in 1984 and 1985-86, it's because the gun works, which is the army essentially, because the current president, the incumbent, went to the bush, and the extent of the army involvement was seen then. Fast forward to 2021, 2016, and 2011, 2005. You can see that the army involvement has always been there in determining the results of those elections. It means the colonial era in and of itself has had an impact, and a large impact, one in terms of army involvement. But it can't be army involvement only anyways. The second thing that I'm going to talk about is that the impunity or
yes, Pata is interrupting to pose a question.
Okay.
You
please.
are in your last minute. Yes, please.
I'm in my last minute. Means
Yes.
it's protected, right?
Oh,
Okay.
yes.
Yes. Then I'm going
Thank
to
you for reminding me.
Then I'm going to continue.
Oh, yes.
Here's the thing. You also have citizens that, starting from 1959 when Baganda boycotted, These days you have individuals, and it's a trend. You look at the 1980 elections, there are people that were not involved in those elections. Even when they were involved, there are people that didn't vote. It's because there has been a minority in the terms of, like, there has been an influence by government in making people not go to vote. In 2021, very few youth, I was eligible to vote by then, but I didn't go because I feared I would meet an army officer and he would probably, with a red beret, and you know what that means, right? Same thing, in 2005, when the term limits were removed, people decided to boycott. In 2011, that's why you have presidential candidates like Kizza Besigye saying he's not going to contest again in elections. It's simply because he doesn't trust the system.
Kaka,
that means
your time is
there
up.
are a lot of individuals that are put away by the government based on them trying to participate in elections. I rest.
Thank you for your submission. May we now hear from the representative of Uganda Pentecostal University, Stuart Calvin Barnabas.
Thank you very much, our moderator. Akito Barnabas is my name, pursuing bachelor's degree at Uganda Pentecostal University. First and foremost, there is a philosopher called George Satayama stated that he who doesn't remember the past is condemned to repeat it. Our history and our past has to be remembered. But the moment that the leaders that we have today, they feel like they have forgotten it. And the problems they are facing right now is that they are not concerned about our history and our past. Let's come back to the question, to what extent has Uganda's colonial legacy influenced democratic practice in Uganda? When you look at the scramble and partition of Uganda, of Africa, that is starting from 1885. From that date is when Uganda became a British protectorate. That means all the laws that were loved in Britain were influenced to come and be manifested in the country. After being manifested in the country, when we come to the present, that is 1962, when we attained our independence, the British had to choose the leaders who come into forth, but in ambiguity. These are the people who are going to bring their influence to come into practice in our country. For example, they chose Uganda in the central, and they gave them powers such that their interests can be manipulated or brought into the country. However, we are seeing that they discarded them in a way that in the 1900 Uganda agreement, they brought the salient features that lowered Uganda at a certain point. For example, taking out all the powers of Kabaka. Before, in our leadership as Uganda, or Uganda by then kingdoms, the king was the great. But once the 1900 Uganda agreement was introduced, the Kabaka was no more, whereby they even demarcated boundaries where Uganda should stop and the other kingdoms Tolo should stop. Let's come back to the question, how has it influenced the practice in Uganda? The leadership we have today currently, by the president we have, is still following the procedures of the colonialists. Starting from the leadership of the army. I want to let this honorable house to know that the UPDF we call today, the Uganda People's Defense Force Army, it was formerly NRA, National Resistance Army. The question I pose to this honorable house is, do you expect someone to be against the leader who brought the army? The answer is no. And once you do it, it is by evident in law reports, even daily monitor reports, said by himself, he who tries to go against me will be what? Will be crushed. Such system was also with the British by then. If you are not in line with what they wanted, you could not be favored. Am I right? How are we going to have a free and fair elections if at all we don't remember our past? Another point, we are still living in the period whereby this democratic system is somehow favoring the ethics. I'm from this tribe, I'm from the other tribe. That is not the case. When we look at this honorable house, we are taking what have been taking food, but the question is that food being prepared by one ethnical group? It has been prepared by someone called Inancha, Tumusime, or Pio, but at the end of the day, we are all satisfied. We are being led by a country who doesn't see that we need unity. It looks at ethics. Are we together? When you look at in the UPDF, at a certain point I I would not judge the UPDF such as how they involve themselves in the polling stations, because first and foremost, as a soldier, we all know it. They get order from above. But it is evident enough, even the rallies that we've been having, you've been seeing the what? The soldiers also, in another way, not shooting, falling back. Daily monitor reports, they show the late Kawesa, may his soul rest in peace. He was supposed to be leading the police in a certain rally, stopping the people from violating. However, one policeman started shooting the protesters with tear gas. It is on record, he asked them, on whose orders do you act on? This is an incident that shows that even though people in the army, even in the police, there are some who love our country. But because they get orders from the above, they cannot go against them. Kawesa was able to stop the violence, but out of reason. I also don't judge them. These are our mothers, these are our fathers, these are our aunts. At a certain point, what shall they eat? What shall we eat in a family? And all it is because it is all caused by poverty we have in the country, whereby those who are on the top, they eat all they have for their families and their grandchildren. Land at this moment, it cannot be shared by all. In the past, during the British, all the land was crown land. Why would crown land, a person who is a stranger, have much of the land in Uganda? And moreover, those ones that have good climate, how selfish it is. It is the same thing manifesting here. In the system, in the institutions, the powers that are leading are the ones that are enjoying it. The question is, I would like this Honorable House and the youth, why are we here? We are here for a common cause, change. But however, the change, we can bring it into forth when we reason, when we work together, not depending on the government, not depending on anyone, but having the right thing to be done. And what is the right thing to be done? If I'm a lawyer, if you are a doctor, you are a businessman, let's preach the gospel to change the country and get fed up of the colonial system that are in the veins of even in the current leadership.
Barnabas, your time is up. Thank you for your submission.
I so submit.
May I, just for emphasis, repeat the rules. The first and last minutes of the precurrent speaker's speech are protected. In the 8th minute, a fellow panelist may interrupt with a question on a point of information or a point of order. The audience will only intervene during the time when the moderator opens up the debate to the plenary. May we now proceed and hear from Ms. Basita Kasfa, the representative of Makerere University Business School.
Thank you so much for emphasis. My name is Muteesa Kasfa Matene, not Batista. Thank you. So from the question that we've been asked, as my fellow panelists have been giving you their submissions, we are asked to talk about how the colonial legacy has affected the democracy today. And to take you back, because a lot of history has been said, so I just want to pick a little from what they have said. We've had previously, during the colonial rule, we had the divide and rule. And I am pointing or citing out this because we have faced so many challenges today with this legacy that was left. And it is through these ethnic groups whereby people think there is favor for some tribes and people, and now they get biased because they think a certain candidate or a certain party is being supported by this and this group of tribe, so they think it is so much to deal with. So to talk about it, in the colonial era, that was used, and the divide and rule was used to weaken Africans so that they would be easily manipulated and easily stolen, because we all know that when these people came to our country, however much they were making it look like it was for our own good, it was entirely for their selfish reasons. We know they had come here because they had sat down and seen the map of Africa. They came here when they already know what they were coming for. So they came here well knowing they're coming for the raw materials to go and build their countries. But when they came here, they manipulated Africans and made them look like this was going to help them. This is when we saw these things of the divide and rule coming in, so that Africans can fight each other. And when you're fighting each other, there is never going to be a development. Now, this is what is happening now. If, for example, Banyankole are fighting Baganda, when are we ever going to develop as a country? This country is made up of everyone. Why are you pointing fingers? Why are you doing the blame game? And now to to end my submission, we've had questions of what should we do from the previous generations. Everyone is saying, what can we do? We are the youth, we don't have power. And I wonder, do people even know the power they hold? This is when I call people who have now, for example, the law students we have here, when you go back home, sensitize these people, tell them their rights, tell them that they hold the power to change everything in this country. Do not leave these people in darkness. These people are out there feeling manipulated because they do not know the law. And to the people that have access to the Constitution, it would be very fair if you people translated it to other languages so that people who cannot understand English, they can also understand the Constitution and know the power they hold. Now back to the point of the divide and rule. It is very evident here that even when some of the leaders are campaigning, it is unfortunate that we see them saying, why are you still supporting this person? You've seen what he has done. He has not done anything for us. Of course, we can never have a perfect leader, but that's not the point now. What are we going to do is the question. And like I was saying, there has been a question that has never been answered. Even some of our elder brothers here can evidence. They have always talked about what can we do, but they have done nothing. And when these people, for example, the president and his fellows wanted to liberate the country, they did not go anywhere to ask someone, what can we do? They went and fought. They thought outside the box, went and fought to liberate their country. Now this goes back to us, the youth. What can we do? Who are we going to ask? Definitely nobody. If you feel like you should do something, then the time is now. These people went to the bush when they are our age mates. They were 24, 25, 20. There is no one here who is 18. Every one of us is above 18, and that means you can do anything to liberate the country. So these questions of what can we do should stop now. Back about the manipulation thing also, they manipulated us, and now they're asking us to talk about how the colonial rule has influenced our democracy today. Now let's talk about the manipulation during campaigns. You see how these people come and bring you the world of fantasy. They tell you things that cannot be done in just one night, but they want you to believe them because this manipulation thing came way back from the colonialists when they were manipulating Ugandans, telling them that this was for their own good, giving them petty reasons, and Ugandans fell for it, and you saw the outcomes that came above. So now this is the time. When these leaders come to you with small money, you end up falling for them, and you end up taking the wrong people to parliament. When these laws are passed and they're now here getting you where you're not supposed to be paying, you get one person to blame. You do not blame yourselves as citizens. Yet it is your responsibility to take these people to parliament. It is your responsibility to play your role in your villages. Tell these people, let them not be manipulated. If someone brings you bribe, it is actually even okay for you to record them and bring these things to raw and show them that this candidate so-and-so was trying to manipulate me or to bribe me. It is entirely our responsibility to save the country, and I said to a larger extent, and on a negative side, the colonial rule really influenced our democracy today. Thank you.
Thank you. You have adhered to the timelines and donated to us about 2 minutes of your time. May I ask if, yes, you want to pose a question to her? Information, please.
All right. My information is simply very simple, right? I think even when we have the divide and rule mechanism that has been entrenched into people that are in the country dating back from 1900 and to the early elections that we had in 1958, I still think us as individuals that took over power in the country, right, like the Obotes that took over power legally, they had the mandate to change things like that, but they didn't change it. So the thing is, I don't want to lay a blame game on the colonialists. I think that is flawed. I think the people that took power then, and us as of now, we also have a duty or a responsibility to create some bit of change. And if we don't do that, then that becomes a problem.
Thank you, Kaka, for your information. May we now move on to the fifth panelist from Bishop Stuart University, Mr. Ainebiona Marvin. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, our moderator tonight. Now, I will not go back to history that has been credited, because of course my panelists here have discussed the entire history. I would not go back to that stage. But I just want to take us briefly back. What governs a country? And what really governs a country? Is it the people? Is it the laws? Or is it just mere standard of what we have on board and how that then helps us. Now, basically what I really believe in is that the laws, and most especially the grand norm, which is always the constitution, is what then governs citizens. Our constitution is very clear that in most of these articles, Article 1 talks about sovereignty of the people and gives people the utmost liberty to decide on certain things. And then of course the preamble as well has critically discussed some of these things. But when you have to look at what happened in history, in 1962, the constitution that was existent was a constitution that was critically influenced by the British. So we have a constitution on board, which is our normal law, which is our grand norm, and it is influenced by the British. So the standard of the laws that are then governing us are basically laws that, by that time, are basically laws that are from the British. Now, going back to 1966, Prime Minister Obote abrogates the 1962 Constitution and declares himself president. And that is clear. That simply means he has interest on the Constitution, which is the grand norm of the law. 1967, they just promulgate a constitution, and that is after Milton Obote was very clear to look at the standard of the parliament that was existent by then. And then now, of course...
Marvin, I have to interrupt you. Kaka has a follow-up question.
My question to you is very simple, right? You're talking about how the law that was made then was followed. I think it's just information, right? I have to inform you that we had a constitution that was made by the people, not by the law, in 1962 and in the follow-up years. And also, there is a difference between making good laws and actually implementing them. I don't think we have bad laws as a country, right? But we play with the constitution a lot, and aside from that, we also don't implement those laws the way we are supposed to.
Thank you, Kaka. Hamid, did you have something to say? Please, so that he may respond at once.
Thank you very much, our dear esteemed modulator, our esteemed judges, and the entire house at large. Allow me, because I missed a chance to ask my colleague, my counterpart, Kaka. Allow me pass this briefly.
Ask Marvin rather, in a minute, please.
My point of information was moving to Kaka, but maybe I will come after.
Okay.
Okay, for that hiccup anyway, we'll call it that. Now, to Kaka, and maybe where I was coming, I think there is need for follow-up. There is what we call a standard of follow-up, and it is where I was actually coming. Now, why I'm dragging nails to the Constitution is because these people kept on playing with the Constitution. And in 1966, Obote plays with the Constitution and drags it to somewhere that we existently see. In 1967, the same Constitution is promulgated, but then it is much more pushed to the wall, and we look at that Constitution by then, a Constitution that was looking at military rule, and in that very aspect, that Constitution still abolishes some of these things like kingdoms and much more influences a military rule, and also looks at one single party system, and that is what is existent in the following years. And that is what has been happening. Look at the 2005 promulgation that scrapped off term limits. Look at the 2017 bill that now looked at scrapping off the age limit. So that is existent simply because people know, and history will always repeat itself, with the laws that we are always existent. Because the laws now are the ones that are governing everything that is happening in status quo. And that is why I was showing you where it is coming from, and that is why it is very much more important. Now, getting back to the extent, and which is the major key question, is on the aspect of Buganda's boycott, which they actually talked about. Now, if you call 25 universities here to present a certain topic on A, B, C, and D, and maybe one university boycotts that, and maybe the 25 universities exist on the scale of the entire country, that does not simply mean that one university that has boycotted is going to stop the others from proceeding at the end of the day. So Buganda's boycott was merely something that laid loopholes at the end of the day, rather than take on an existent role. Now they go on ethnicity, which I actually feel that is supposed to be talked about, because the colonialists bring in religions and also look at the Uganda aspect, which is the Uganda kingdom, and they go on to introduce this aspect where we have Uganda kingdom being a superior kingdom. And they forget that the country is made up of very many kingdoms, and the other one now takes the supreme rule. So it simply means that the other kingdoms are now not going to look at the main purpose of why should we have a rule in A, B, C, and D, and now will forget why it is important to have elections at the end of the day. And this drags us very close to what is happening in status quo, simply because we are still having, I do not want to mention the political party, which is simply dragging us to the wall of the same existent ethnic disparitions. So we simply have a standard of partitions, on traditions, on religion, and these things all exist from the colonial rule. Now, when it goes back to military involvement and
Your
manipulation,
time is up, Marvin. Sum up, please.
when it goes back to manipulation and military involvement, the British now used to have some of these aspects brought on board, simply because we had military rule then. So it simply is coming back to the current years, and that is what has been happening, much as more as manipulation, as they already clearly talked about. Thank you.
Thank you. And with Marvin's submission, that marks the end of our first round of the questions. We are now, unfortunately, I cannot take your hand, but let us go into the second round of the questions. And may I call for your attention so that you can note down the question. So the question is as follows. Since the restoration of multi-party political dispensation in 2005, in your view, has there been a marked improvement in the electoral processes of the country? Since the restoration of the multi-party political dispensation in 2005, in your view, has there been a marked improvement in the electoral processes of the country? For this round, I'll ask Marvin to start us off.
Thank you so much. Now, multi-party system in and itself is a direct link to whether can we have credible elections or whether we cannot have credible elections. Now, when I am framing legitimacy of elections, it is quite important, and this started directly from when we had kingdoms, chiefdoms, in those hereditary years. When we had some of these things, governance was only based on some of these rules. Now, in such an aspect, before you become a king, it is not looked upon whether are you competent or not competent to lead a certain group of people. Now, how does this now link us to what we are then discussing? Multi-party system, I think, is quite important, mostly when it comes back to critiquing government at the end of the day. Because we always have an existent government, but the government, yes, does A, B, C, and D, and if it was a single-party system of governance, then we would not look at some of these things in the right way. Now, if you are to look at the current status quo and compare it with maybe 1967, when Milton Obote now tried to abolish multi-party system using military rule, you realize at the end of the day, it was simply looking upon the crossroads of can I have a single party system and do anything I want at the end of the day. Like, it was not so much more inclusive, and it was only looking for where can I hide in the shelf and do ABC, and there no one is going to question that. Now, in our current parliament, if I'm to bring you back, we see most of the times when something happens, just recently we are facing a crisis when it comes to media, and you've seen Daily Monitor today had an open paper, the front page had that funny image. And it critically notes that there is so much more discrepancy when it comes back to media and how it is running. So Parliament sat the other day and started critiquing government, and especially the opposition side. And they started putting loopholes on whether some of these things are happening in the right sense. Now, if we did not have multi-party system, and it was only NRM in government, then we would not have some of these things happening. I think that is the quite importance of multi-party system of governance. Now, let it go back to our legal framework. I remember very well in a case that Councillor Aboneke here filed in the courts of law, dealing with the right of health, and it was a case Aboneke Michael versus Watoto Church. And if you're to look at some of these things happening in that way, they wouldn't happen if we did not look at the aspirations of different people. So at the end of the day, aspirations are there, but then people are not going to exercise some of these things if we do not have a multi-party system that is going to critique the government at the end of the day. So at a certain point in time, in 2005, when we had citizens come up and question government, where we are not having multi-party system, and you saw Dr. Kizza Besigye come on board, even when Kizza Besigye came on board and we saw a lot of pools, and even when we have all these political parties, you realize that political parties are existent, but then they do not have so much more power than the ruling government. This is simply because there are so much more other loopholes that are stopping them from practicing whatever they really feel like they should practice at the end of the day. Now, I really would want to take us to the aspect of the multi-parties being existent, but then they do not have power to exercise their rights and duties. EC wakes up in the morning, puts rules, and these rules are not upheld, simply because people are not looking at the certain aspects that multi-party system would merely uphold. So at the end of the day, it does not make any sense if we have, in one way, that we only have multi-parties to critique government, and we do not have multi-parties existent to exercise their rights and responsibilities as other parties than what we have in status quo. So at the end of the day, it really does not make any sense. Much as we have the parties existent, but are the parties doing exactly what they are supposed to do? Is NUP as a political party under the multi-party system? Yes, we've seen very many political parties scale up from that right, but are they doing anything in regards to change of government, or are they just only making celebrity pangendrum, which does not make any sense?
Thank you, Marvin, for your submission. In this round, just to clarify, you will be limited to strictly 5 minutes of speech. So let us now hear from Kasfa.
Thank you so much. Getting straight to the question, if the restoration of multi-parties really helped or really influenced or marked improvement in our political processes, in my view, I would say it was more of a sign of democracy that was being demonstrated to Ugandans, that now everyone would particularly engage themselves in any party they wanted and would vote for whoever they wanted to vote. But as years went by, we realized that it was maybe some kind of a trap where we were put, that we have to keep believing that yes, we have power to change things, but yet our power is being held at a certain point in life, in life. Because now we have these parties. We've seen them having leaders. There are many political party representatives in parliament. But for these political parties where we've not seen change of at least someone losing at a presidential level and maybe them coming back, it leaves us to some certain kind of questioning if it is really, if it was of any importance introducing these political parties. Because Ugandans are only seen taking part or changing leaders at only the MP levels, the LC levels, but when it gets to the presidential elections, what is it? We've seen people contesting in very many political parties. People come up and campaign just like any other, yes, however much there are some violences that come up that we cannot avoid because Uganda, we are not going to say it is a perfect country and there is nothing like a perfect country. We have to really realize that our democracy is gradual. It is increasing day by day, or it is developing. But that aside, what are these political parties really helping us? We would be saying they have improved if we would see any kind of improvement that they are bringing to the country, not whereby a certain group of people are going to hold power and only give the less privilege. Okay, I will not call them less privileges, but give other political parties chances to only operate at a lower level, and they cannot have any say on the higher levels. That is not improvement. However much they came, yes, we appreciate because it was a sign that we could participate in this, in choosing whoever we wanted to choose, but it is not really, if I cannot say it has improved a lot in our democracy today.
That's an interesting submission. Let us now move on to the representative of Uganda Pentecostal University, Calvin.
Yes, thank you very much, our moderator. 2005, first and foremost, I appreciate that time because we are seeing pluralism, whereby many political parties participated and they were given a chance to come and participate in the elections. However, if we come to the question if they have brought a restoration to the electoral system currently, 100% I say no, they haven't. Why? In those very elections, we are seeing that the army still was engaging itself in those elections. This is the very thing that is happening today. The army is getting engaged in the electoral processes. When it is time for polling stations, you find the men in uniform are already there. It is very unfortunate that even currently, when a certain opposition party is on rallies, the other party is going to make rallies freely without disturbances. But in these elections, you find that roadblocks, having army tanks, having army vehicles are being pressed. So, do you want to tell me that the 2005 the multi-party system has brought any change? It hasn't. They have been repeating itself. When you talk about the human rights, there was always intimidation in those elections. And when we come to international observers, there was limitation, whereby only the televisions and the radio stations, especially UBC, were the ones to pronounce that is what is supposed to be pronounced. Let's come into the petition of Dr. Chiza Besigye versus Yoweri Kaguta Museveni in 2006. It was well stated by the judges that the elections were not free and fair. However, it requested that some irregularities by the Electoral Commission be changed. For example, stopping the external observers from observing the elections. It is very magnificent and also seen by the daily monitor reports in January 2021, where we're seeing international observers being stopped and limited to come intervene the elections. If at all we are still having a free and fair election basing on the pluralism or the coming to forth of multi-party systems, why would you stop international observers from monitoring the elections of Uganda? To that very point, I would like by raise of a hand any member to tell me if his internet was working by then, on 14th January, shutdown of the system, internet. There has not been a way where these elections have brought democracy in the country. And the change must be apprehended. The worst part is that the most evident thing in 2001 elections of Robert Kyagulanyi, in the case of Robert Kyagulanyi versus Electoral Commission and Yoweri Kaguta Museveni, when the judges ruled that the elections, even though they are not free and fair, however, the president still prevailed. It is very unfortunate that one of the judges by she name, after giving a after she stood against the other judges, she was strongly stopped, taken away all her rights that she had. The accounts were freezed, and she had to go for exile for her life. If this system is still manipulating this system, and currently, I want to tell you that even the upcoming 2026 elections, we will never have a free and fair elections. Why? These people, even though they have allowed other parties to come and participate, in behind, they are controlling the system. From the past, they appointed themselves, they could appoint who is going to be the head of electoral commission. I don't expect someone to be appointed by your head, then you give results that are against the other person. The exact results it will be.
All right, thank you very much. I'm just going to ask you that, are you aware that even if the person, the president appoints the chairperson of the electoral commission, are you aware that the parliament has the right to vet that person in or out? All right, thank you very much. So I'm just going to start by the question, right? Since the restoration of the multi-party political dispensation in 2005, has there been a marked improvement?
Thank you very much, but also I support your submission. I appreciate. I want to answer you back. Thank you very much. I want to answer you back by telling you this. Even though the parliament has the rights to make things right, the member of parliaments we have, they have no chance to make things right. It is very unfortunate whereby the member of parliaments have to discuss matters of the country in the parliament. They don't discuss them from the parliament, they're taken to Chankwanzi. How would you give the exact procedure to be brought when you have been taken out of the house where the rights has to be preempted and be taken to Chankwazi? If at all I was having 2 minutes, now I'm having 1 minute, it would be not interrupted.
Thank you so much. I would like to inform the pre-current speaker that if you can present evidence that there have been meetings and sittings that have been taken to Chankwanzi, provide them to the House. Because what do you mean? We see sittings every now and then in Parliament, and then when you come here, you tell us that things are taken to Chankwanzi. Please present evidence.
The evidence is very clear. Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you very much. When daily monitor reports, you have a phone and we have internet. Daily monitor reports 2021, they show that the member of parliaments have been taken to Chankwanzi for the meetings. Why would they be taken meetings for Chankwanzi, yet we have the parliament in Uganda? Such irregularities won't stop. And it's very unfortunate the members, or we the youth who are supposed to be going together in line, we are supporting meetings to be taken in Chankwanzi. Why did we have the parliament from forth? Why did we appoint the speaker? It is evident enough as I conclude that even the speaker that is supposed to be heading the parliament is engaging herself in the rallies. The speaker of the parliament engaging herself in the rallies, then how shall we come to a conclusion of a change in the country? I so submit.
All right, let me just emphasize the rules. First and foremost, for the audience, let us strictly listen in silence to the speakers. Then secondly, as for the panelists, please, while the pre-current speaker is making their submission, only raise up your hand to make either a point of information or to ask a question. Otherwise, you wait for the entire duration of their speech, then you'll have your turn. Thank you. Let's proceed.
All right. I'll just start with the question. Since the restoration of the multi-party political dispensations in 2005, has there been a marked improvement in the electoral processes of the country Uganda? I'm just going to start by showing you what a good electoral process looks like. Looks like 4 things. The first one, it means you should have an independent and competent electoral management system, which is the electoral commission. They should be impartial and they should be competent in whatever they do. And that is provided for in the constitution after that referendum in Article 61. So freedom and fairness. Individuals, according to Article 1, we are supposed to have freedom and fairness in expressing ourselves and ability to vote by a secret ballot. That is what entails a good electoral process. The third thing is that there should be transparency from all the parties involved, from the electorate to the voters to the electoral commission. There should be transparency. I'm going to show you that we don't have those three things, and the last one, which is the rule of law, which is the fourth one, I don't think we also have the rule of law like being followed. The restoration of the multi-party dispensation is in Article 69 again, Section B. It also says that we'll have a multi-party political system in Uganda as a country. It definitely means I only have to interrogate if there has been a marked improvement. Notice, those four things show us whether there has been a marked improvement or not. The first one is sovereignty and free and fair elections, right? Article 1, Section 4 of the Constitution says, people should be governed through regular, free and fair elections. Have we seen this happen after 2005, after the referendum happened? No. There was violence. Over 54 people were killed in 2021. It means we really don't have free and fair elections happening, and that means it has in and of itself worsened. It means on that note, on that principle that guides good electoral processes, we have had worsening aspects in terms of like the electoral process. The second thing that I'm going to talk about is an independent electoral commission. Notice, he says that Article 60/62 of the Constitution says the electoral commission shall be established and it shall be independent and it shall not be subject to control of anyone in authority. It means, and let's just be very honest about this, right? The president appoints, and there are several times that the members of parliament have probably gone ahead, to reject the appointment, not only of the chairperson of the electoral commission, but even ministers. But those ministers continue serving as ministers even without parliamentary approval. It means the EC, the electoral commission, in and of itself, which is a principle, and it's supposed to be independent and impartial, is
Kaka,
actually
I now
not
have
impartial.
to interrupt you to entertain a question from Kasfa.
Thank you so much. Mine is a point of information. We talked about Ugandans not having the free and fair elections. What are you trying to mean? Are you saying we are not electing? If the freedom is not there, tell us to some extent it is not there. But when you come and tell us that there is nothing like free and fair election, you're literally saying that we are not going to have any, we are not having any elections. Yet it is evidence that people are elected, people go for voting, and if at some extent or to a large extent some violence comes in, yes, we have to say it is there. We talk about that, but do not come here and tell Ugandans that they do not have free and fair elections. Then why are they being registered?
Thank
Why
you
do we have
for your
the EC?
information. Pass on the microphone to Marvin. Marvin?
So, Kaka well established the aspect of checks and balances in the electoral system. And he is very well explaining the aspect that when the chairman, EC, or any one of the appointees, especially when it comes to the EC, is rejected by parliament, then they go on to serve. And I think this is not true based on my knowledge, because we've not seen such incidences. And then maybe next to correct him, I think we've had very many interruptions where we say Article 60, then you quote section. It's article and clause or paragraph. So I think we need to be rectified on that.
It's interesting, but I think your submission has provoked a number of reactions. Quickly.
Point of information to my previous lady. You know,
Excuse me.
my
To
previous
who?
to this lady.
No. That's out of the rows.
All
Thank
right,
you.
Marvin, thank you very much for correcting me. I'm really not a law student, but I read the Constitution and understand what's there. So, thank you very much for the correction, It says clause. I'll quote it next time like that. Anyway, I was still talking about the four principles that govern a good electoral process and how they are also constituted in the 1995 Constitution, right? and its effects on the election process. And I already said, there has not been a significant change. I talked about the three things. She tells us free and fair elections. Let's be honest. I start by talking about the principles that govern a good election process. And in my submission, I show you that these principles are not being followed in Uganda. That means we don't have a free and fair election. That is very simple for you to understand. Second thing that I'm going to talk about is on the aspect of the supremacy, right? The supremacy and the supremacy of a government and its involvement in the electoral process. Notice, the Constitution also provides that individuals should not in any way interrupt the electoral process, regardless of the authority that they hold or the authority that they man. You've seen,
Kaka, you may conclude in a minute.
yes,
please.
you've seen the president, the incumbent, using state resources in order to win elections. It means the competition and the transparency is not fair. That definitely means the electoral process is fraud. It means, like, in summary, it definitely means there have been very little reforms that exist, and the little, what makes me use the word little is because you've had ghosts that probably exist in the voter register that have been there. The 2005 referendum enabled us in 2011 and 2016 to reduce those ghost voters using the Electoral Commission biometric system, right? That is the only positive, as Kaka, I can derive from the referendum that happened. Aside from that, I think in a very little way, it has had a very little impact, and the impact, most of it has been negative. I beg to submit.
Thank you for your submission. Bata Hamid, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, the esteemed modulator. In the very first, it will be a disappointment and a betrayal to myself if I keep the ball rolling, minus collecting my fellow honorable, Mr. Kaka, on the previous question. I asked for 1 additional second to correct him. Ladies and gentlemen, in the previous question, allow me collect this. My comrade Kaka, he mentioned of something here that piqued my attention. He said that the 1961 elections were free and fair. We cannot blame the colonial legacy for the unfairness of the 1961 elections. Ladies and gentlemen, the esteemed audience, allow me collect my colleague here that the 1961 elections were organized under the colonial constitution, a constitution that was designed in Europe, the constitution that was designed in Europe and implemented in Uganda. Is that free and fair, ladies and gentlemen? He mentioned, remember the question was all about, the question was asking that, to what extent the colonial legacy impacted democracy. He said militarism, 1961 elections, my dear fellow honorable, we didn't have any military. We had the British army or the British police regulating affairs. And you can't say that militarism impacted from the colonial legacy impacting elections in the post-independence. Militarism started from 1962 when Apollo Obote came into power. That was a correction to him. Allow me continue. Ladies and gentlemen, on the question asked,
In a minute, you've consumed most of the time correcting him, but conclude in a minute. Thank you.
Thank you. I request, allow me continue. Allow me continue. Now, ladies and gentlemen, in the question that has been asked currently, the question is the amendment, the 2005 amendment, multi-party system. Allow me, ladies and gentlemen, it will be a disappointment to me if I go straight to the 2005 amendment without talking about the 1995 Constitution. Ladies and gentlemen, 1995 Constitution was drafted. In the 1995 Constitution, since we were just coming from the situation of political turmoil, we didn't bring on table the multi-party system. The NRM, the 1995 Constitution was drafted during the movement system, and 1996 elections were organized under the movement system. But in the condition of the 1995 Constitution, they agreed that later a referendum shall be brought on table to seek a guidance from the citizens to see whether the Constitution, the multi-party, should be brought on table. In 2000, ladies and gentlemen, the referendum was brought on table. It inspired the amendment of 2005. But we cannot don't credit the constitutional amendment of 2005 that brought multi-party system. Ladies and gentlemen, how can we credit an amendment which were brought on bribery? Just imagine, 5 million shillings were distributed to members of parliament to sign on that amendment of 2005, and then we come and credit, wow, the amendment enabled us get free and fair. Ladies and gentlemen, on that very point, allow me continue by telling you.
Conclude, please.
Yes, as I'm
30
concluding.
seconds.
As I'm concluding, in the 2005 amendment, we saw Article 6 and 9, which talks about political system. This was amended and introduced the multi-party system. Not only that, Article 105, that brings about the tenure of the president. That's the term limit. This was the greatest betrayal that Uganda has ever received in the year 2005. The removal of the term limit. Before we look at multi-party system, let's look at the greatest betrayal that inherited the ineffectiveness of the political system of Uganda.
Thank you for your submission.
As I'm concluding, sir, in my last minute,
30 seconds, okay.
in my 30 seconds, therefore, allow me stand by telling you that it was because of the constitutional amendment in 2005 that explains why military involvement was predominantly. It was because of 2005 constitutional amendment that brought the electoral commission, because by the way, Article 6 and 61 was also amended in the very year 2005. But still, electoral commission remained independent, governed by only one lion, dominating the entire of the jungle.
Your point is made. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Let us now go into the third round of the questions. I'll once again call for your attention so that you can note down the question. The question is as follows. Do you consider the military a factor in our civil politics? Do you consider the military a factor in our civil politics? Then, as a follow-up question, in your responses, you'll have to consolidate the two aspects of the question. Do you consider the military a factor in our civil politics? But more particularly, do you think that the sitting president, Yoweri Museveni, was justified to seek electoral justice? Do you think that the sitting president, Yoweri Museveni, was justified to seek electoral justice in the disputed 1980 elections through the barrel of the gun? So the last component of the question, do you think that the sitting president, Yoweri Museveni, was justified to seek electoral justice in the disputed 1980 elections through the barrel of the gun? The barrel of the gun. I'll now begin from the middle and ask Calvin to submit first. You are limited to 3 minutes.
Thank you very much. First and foremost, the question goes that do you think military as a civil, do you consider military as a factor of civil politics?
The question is as follows. Do you consider the military a factor in our civil politics?
Yeah, thank you very much. First and foremost, I agree that military is a factor in our civil politics. How? When you look into the Constitution of the Republic of Uganda, it gives military powers not only to safeguard the sovereignty of the state, but also to bring law and order. However, in Section 40 of the UPDF Act, even though so supports the article, the military, we are having a question in mind as citizens? Does it act on the powers according to the Constitution or on the powers of overshadow? We are in a situation whereby you cannot judge the military in entering the politics or being on the polling stations, because by the powers of the Constitution, the UPDF, they are allowed to. The question in mind that I ask myself is, some military act beyond their powers that are supposed to be done. For example, intimidation, unlawful arrests. We are in a situation whereby the military even considers itself in arrest of civilians. Not only that, trying the civilians into the martial courts. It is very much sad that civilians, instead of being tried in the courts of where they're supposed to be served, we are now being taken into the martial courts. In the 31st case, Justice Owiny Lidolo kindly and wholly stated that civilians must be stopped from being tried in the martial courts. As a state or as a country, we thought like this is the end. Now we have won the war of military getting involved in the country. What they did in April, we are seeing the passing of the bill, UPDF bill, in the parliament, whereby that bill, after it was passed, as per current, a civilian, it is allowing a civilian to be tried in the martial courts. In the ambiguity, when you go back to the question, 100% currently, the army is involving themselves and they're affecting our civil politics. We thought that from the 31st case, we have come to the end whereby civilians have their freedom, basing on the 31st judgment of his Chief Justice. But later, the passing of the bill, it is a statute or it is a trick that is going to rule the opposition or stop them from participating. When you look into...
You have a minute to conclude. If you could consider the second component of the question.
As I come into a conclusion, I want to let this Honorable House know that Makerere said that he who knows how to control coercion controls power. His Excellency President, after knowing that now the judiciary have made a holding that is going to give powers to the civilians to have their freedom, is bringing the UPDF bill, which is not right. Therefore, 100% I agree that the army is having a negative impact in the civic participation of the citizens. I so submit.
Thank you. Kasfa?
Thank you so much. The first question says, do you consider the military a factor in our civil politics? To begin with, we all know that the main role of the military in the country is to keep the country safe, to guard the country, not to come in. Coming into elections is not entirely part of their responsibility, but however, they can be deployed if there is need for them at some polling stations. And it being exaggerated nowadays has caused a lot of, I can call it a lot of intimidation in people by them knowing that it comes with a lot of violence when the military is around. People feel intimidated, and this is why we see that most of the times the turn-up is always lower than the number of the registered voters. And we would consider that if they can, if not necessary, please let the police is always enough. We know that they're there to keep law and order, but then if there is no violence at a polling station, what is the fear for? Why are you bringing the military with people dressed in heavy clothes that are First of all, they are not sensitizing these people to tell them that these people, the military people, are also people like them. We only see them as animals. Some of us believe that these people at some point are not humans. So if they could maybe sensitize and make us close to them, we would appreciate their presence on polling stations. But the fact that they only come in where there is violence, that is why we term them as violent people at some point. So we believe that they are needed, but not to every polling station, because they bring intimidation in people. Let them be deployed where there is a lot of chaos that they can handle in case the police fails. And to the next question, if I think the sitting president, Yoweri Kaguta Museveni, was justified to seek election justice in the dispute. Which one was this? Okay,
in the disputed election, 1980.
Okay. to my understanding, I have two submissions. Okay, different submissions on that point.
In a minute.
Okay, to some extent, I think he was okay because it was okay for him to seek justice. Because after the election, everyone was complaining that it was just in the favor of Milton Obote. And many people were complaining that there was vote rigging, there was intimidation, so the voting was not fair. So it was okay for him to go and seek for the free and fair election. But then on the other hand, it was also not okay because he had been seen in some of things that were bringing violence in the country at the time. So he was seen as a threat to the country, and this is why maybe Obote was, I don't want to use maybe, I'm sorry. But this is why Obote was bringing this vote rigging and intimidation to the people. So to a larger extent, yes, it was okay for him to seek justice.
Question. In 3 minutes.
Okay, yeah, 3 minutes are quite less, but still, we could go on. Now, military inclusion in state politics, or even in civil politics, as laid by the question, is something that, of course, we would all rebuke. But in accordance with the 2021 general elections, I am not saying that we should have military included. But military, pursuant to Article 208 of the Constitution, Clause 2, military is a non-partisan agency of government and is a security force, but non-partisan in nature. Now, it is quite important to note that the military can come on board when there are issues, when there is so much more of state emergency, like what happened in 2021 elections. We have a political party that is existent on board, and 50 people, close to 50 people, die on streets simply because the political party is putting in a spirit in citizens where you can wake up in the morning and say, we go, and you just burn streets, loot people's property, simply because you're trying to push an agenda and you're pushing that agenda through violence. Now, it is a very wrong path if citizens would come on board. And I think I'm also going to link that with an extent of the question. Because in 1980, if Museveni, yes, was to seek for justice, which he could see that he couldn't get out of the judiciary or other state arms of government rather than go to the bush war. Yes, it is illogical, but then the mode of fighting it is quite illogical as well. So the existence of the mode of attaining success, I think, is what was wrong in nature. And I really rebuke the aspect of including the military in civil politics. But it is also important to note that when there is a state emergency and when there is need, military should be put on board simply because we are trying to secure what we actually have at the end of the day. It would be wrong to wake up in the morning and just destroy something that has been built for entire 30 or 60 years that the government has been on board, and then you forget that only to protect the interests of a certain political party X. So I think military inclusion is important, but to an aspect when there is urgent need.
Thank you, Marvin, for your submission. Before we hear from Calvin, I have just been reminded of another informal rule which you agreed to prior to your participation in this debate. You are forbidden from consulting your personal phones during the occurrence of the debate. Is that right? Please, let us adhere to all the rules. Calvin. Kaka, sorry, let us hear from Kaka.
All right, I think I'm just going to answer the first part of the question, which says, I'm only looking at the question on my phone.
Beg your pardon?
I'm looking at the question from my phone.
Okay, need I repeat the question for you?
I have it. I'm just going to read it because you said no using phones, but I wrote the question on phone.
The full question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, the question says, do you consider the military a factor in Uganda's civil politics? That's the first part of the question anyway. I think the military is a very big factor in the politics of a country like Uganda, right? And I think they make a lot of influential decisions that we probably get as a country. I think two things that we have to very much talk about is the army's involvement, because the electoral process in and of itself starts after the results have been declared. It looks like the army, like Marvin said, being things like non-partisan and not being involved in the politics of a particular country or favoring a particular political party. I think we can all agree that we're at the Kampala Kawempe by-election, right? We saw a number, and listen, like he said, you are not supposed to get the army on board unless it was a situation like the 2021 that probably the police has been defeated and you need the army to restore order, right? In the by-election of Kawempe, we had several army involvement in the determination of that election results. I still think that even if they had not been involved, they would not change the result anyway. But I also think the army involvement, like current serving members of the army who are not allowed to participate in politics. For example, the CDF, like General Muhozi, abducting people that are associated with opposition political parties. I think they largely influence that because those people that exist in those opposition parties can make a difference, if not probably taken to that basement and being taught Runyankore and all of that. I think that is then a problem because if the army is involved, they determine a lot and they're supposed to be non-partisan. Second part of the question, right?
In a minute, yes.
Second part of the question. I think personally, right, that the current president was justified in going into the bush. Why? Because of several reasons. I quote, the Commonwealth Observers Group that observed the 1980 election said Uganda in 1980, and I quote, Uganda did not hold an electoral process. It held a military induction of the ballot, right? It definitely means these individuals and the person that was in charge of declaring the results of the 1980 under the legal notice that was issued by the UNLF, which took over power from Amin, they said that the only person who is a UPC loyalist who is supposed to mention the election results or announce was Mwanga. And the thing is, by that time, things like courts, you go against the court, the UNLF comes after you, right? There was a lot of impunity that was being put on those people. Systems were not working. That means the only option that the current president had, because it was a military
Your point is made. Your time is up. Pass on the microphone to Hamid.
Wow. Thank you very much, our esteemed modulator. Ladies and gentlemen, dear August House, on the question being clearly tabled, which states that, do you consider the military a factor in our civil politics? That is the question tabled. The second question, do you think that sitting President Yoweri Kaguta Museveni was justified to seek electoral justice in the disputed 1980 elections? Ladies and gentlemen, without bringing my thoughts, going directly to the recorded facts and evidences, when we look at the military involvement in the electoral process, allow me, dear modulator, clearly inform you that when you look at the Constitution, there is no any single article. By the way, I'm not a law student, I'm one teacher in making. But as a civilized student and a civilian, when you go through the Constitution, 1995 Constitution, there is no any single article that brings the military on table during the electoral process. Quote me right. There is no any single article that brings military involvement in the electoral process. For example, Article 208, that is 208, it clearly brings that the UPDF shall be non-partisan, progressive, continuously. Article 209, it clearly says that it clearly brings on table the functions of the UPDF. When we move through those functions, there is no any single function that talks about election processes. Ladies and gentlemen, Article 221, that is 212, it brings the Uganda police, that Uganda police forces shall be nationalistic. Article 219, members of the security forces shall not engage in the what? In the partisan activities. Ladies and gentlemen, do you think as it is in the constitution, it's practically functioning? The answer is no. Allow me move on by telling you. First and foremost, when you look into these articles that bring the military on table, we have looked, dear moderator, in all the elections that have been organized in Uganda, military has dominated. We have seen military officials coming on board and dominating elections. For example, in the 2001 elections, is the General Tunyafuza himself, he came and said
You have a minute.
General
Sum up.
Tunyafuza himself, thank you, sir. General Tunyafuza himself, when he was when he was on BPSC in 2003, he said in 2001, if it wasn't for military, President Museveni wouldn't have won elections, and we say military has created any good in the electoral process. Exactly no. Ladies and gentlemen, as I'm concluding, for example, look at General Kaihura. He was banned from moving to abroad countries. Why? Because of oppressing opposition candidates. Look at General Eli Tumwine after the massacre of innocent people that is on 30th of November 2020, as His Excellency Bobby Wine, the leader of the NUP, was arrested in Iluka. Over 54 Ugandans, citizens, were killed in that riot. Over 500 were imprisoned. General Eli Tumwine came in his capacity as a general. He said, the military has a right to shoot. This is recorded and this is documented. He continued and said that the military did its part when citizens are killed in an election. Ladies and gentlemen, this clearly confirms to us that we have never seen any fairness in the military involvement
Thank
of
you,
the electoral
Pata.
process.
Your time is up.
I have not gone through the second question.
Your
but
time
my
is
point
up,
clear.
unfortunately.
Thank you very much, sir.
Ladies and gentlemen, I call for your attention so that I can field the fourth question. Are civil society organizations and international observers still credible actors in our country's electoral processes? Do you consider civil society organizations and international observers as credible actors in our country's electoral processes? I'll begin with you, Marvin. You have 3 minutes.
Well, thank you so much. I will make a mention of one simple thing. Uganda critically shifted from colonial rule and attained its independence in 1962. And I think that was very much important. And that is the simple reason was to ensure that Uganda now has its own ways of doing things and can simply make rules and run by those rules. Now, that comes on board simply because of international observers. We are trying to shift, much as colonialism is still present in our current system of governance, we are trying to shift from these observers and which role do they have in this place. Civil society organizations like CCG might have quite an important role to remind government that we are doing A, B, C, and D, and they are not right. But international observers might also have quite the same role, but then why are they still intermeddling in our affairs even after getting independence? I think that is quite important as an opening statement. Now, are they still credible actors in our country's politics? Now goes back to what exactly are they doing to satisfy the credibility. If we are talking about credibility, is to look at the transparency that exists in elections and how important that makes elections at the end of the day. If we have civil society organizations that come and promote civic engagement, like I think that is the reason we're actually here, and that is the reason we have media here, recording and sending information to the outside world, so that people know which rights do they have, so that people know that pursuant to Article 59, they have the right to vote, so that people know that there is an EC that is appointed by government or appointed by the president, but still there's an EC, the EC is subjected to checks and balances pursuant to Article 60 or any other laws that are relevant in the same system. So I think civil society organizations are quite important in ensuring that politics go in a way that is standard, but then it does not make international observers important, since we are trying to secure our rule as Uganda. And that is quite important.
Kasfa, your time is up. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Getting straight to the question, in my opinion, I think the civil societies are playing a very crucial role in helping us to get a credible elections in the country today. And this is, they are helping us to push our voices and the knowledge we have about elections to the Ugandans out there that cannot access the materials, maybe the research engines that some of us use, or even the people that cannot get time to study about this. It is so important that when we get hosted to such programs that are organized by the civil society organization, our information or even the intentions of the organizers get out to the people, and people get to know their rights and how they can really change their country. And then back to the international observers, to maybe alternate from the precurrent speaker, I think that the international observers are really necessary, and we need them because when we talk about iPod, we've had iPod in Uganda, and it is there to fund these political parties. Some people mistake this money to be the taxpayers' money, but this is money that is donated by the Netherlands. So meaning that when these people help us and fund us, give us a hand, it helps us to go on with our services in elections, meaning that they are creating a smooth bridge. If they fund us with maybe some materials or even give us advice, it does not necessarily need to be money or something, but if they can...
Yes, pass on the microphone to your neighbor, field your question or render a point of information briefly.
Do you actually believe that there is an aspect of self-sustainability, or do you actually feel that political parties should gain means of getting their own money rather than fight for money that they do not know what is intended for it?
Thank you so much. I really believe that yes, there is a point where we can get to our self-sustainability, but then it does not mean that we do not have to get help from these people, because most of these countries are developed. We are trying to develop our countries. So when they come with ideas that help them to get where we want to get, it would be of so much importance to us. And why wouldn't we say, why do you want to say that you want to get money that you know where it comes from? This money is coming as help. Why are you asking for where it is coming from? For as long as no one has stolen this money from your pocket, it is enough for you to know that they are here to help us, not to take anything from us.
Kasfa, you may conclude.
Okay. To conclude, yes, I'm going to just submit by saying that the international observers are really necessary, and they have helped us to smoothen our election process. Thank you.
Thank you.
First and foremost, I would like to let this Honorable House to know the importance of the civic organizations and also the role of international observers. Civic organizations, their role is to provide a balance in a country where there is no independent institution to give a neutral opinion of what things ought to be. Then the role of international observers is to make sure that they collect information, especially in the electoral process, be broadcasted across the world, and the most crucial role is to make sure that the results correspond with domestic observers. First and foremost, civic organizations are very important. For example, the civic space or the CCG. It has helped us students to know what is wrong or what is done not in ambiguity with the Constitution. However, there are limitations to these organizations, whereby education that has to be passed to the young generation, knowing what is happening in the country. His Excellency from the start banned the civic education, giving a burden for the civic organization to come and convince already the corrupted mind, the tired mind who are in Chikubo, who don't have time to learn. It is only we who are privileged to be in the institutions to come up on this panel or in this honorable house to make things right and talk or debate about them. Secondly, when you talk about the international observers, they play an important role. Basing in January 2021 elections, international observers, they had to give information that is tallying with the domestic observers. However, it is evident through the Daily Monitor reports and New York reports that these observers were limited. They were supposed to be coming in the country like around 12, but they could only allow 3. Not only that, these international observers, they need internet while sending their information. Internet was shut down. Why would internet be shut down for international observers, yet they are responsible for corresponding with the internet and giving terrible results corresponding with the domestic results? I therefore conclude that civic organizations are very important and they work an important role if at all they are in correspondent with international observers through civic education and as well as giving terrible results that are important to know who is the right president-elect, not in ambiguities of being dictated by the Electoral Commission. I so submit.
Kaka, your response to the question?
All right, my response to the question, just outside of my time, I would like to inform the speaker that you should be aware that the Constitution provides for the Electoral Commission to reserve the right to invite international observers or not. Now to the question, right? The question says, are civil society organizations and international observers credible actors in Uganda's electoral process? I would start with the civil society organizations. They look like Center for Constitutional Governance. They look like Agora Discourse, right? Those organizations do 3 things that are very important. The first one is civic education, right? I'm not a law student, but over the past 2 months or so, I have been reading the Constitution so that I get to know what is there and understand my rights, right? I was corrected about how you're supposed to say clause and the rest of the things. I have learned that because of the civil society organizations that exist. Aside from promoting civil education, some of these civil society organizations also go ahead and make sure we have people that can interpret the Constitution in different local languages and people know their civic rights and have civil education at the very least. The second thing that civil society organizations do is demand for accountability and transparency. If you go to the Agora Discourse Twitter handle, they are always calling out the members of parliament. They are always demanding for accountability so that policies are not changed, so that corruption doesn't happen. In relation to the electoral process, they always call out societies like the military or the police from getting involved in the disruption of the rights of these individuals that participate in the electoral process.
I've got to interrupt you to entertain a question or a point of information from Calvin. Quickly.
Thank you very much. I would like to inform Right Honorable Speaker that the Constitution, there's no need to be interpreted into local languages. Why? In the country, we have the right to education. And the right to education, through education, we shall learn to know how the Constitution. When we are having around 106 local languages in the country.
Your response, quickly.
Right, thank you very much. I think that is laughable, right? If we are seated here and we say that the Constitution should not be interpreted in different languages. I come from a very deep village known as a watch. You're going to find people there that can't speak English, can't go to school, and probably burn charcoal or do something that is not related to English in order for them to understand the Constitution.
In a minute,
how are they supposed to know the Constitution
please,
without it being translated into local languages? I'm going to answer that last part of the question, which talks about the international observers. I think, like I said at the beginning, the Electoral Commission in the Constitution reserves the right to invite these individuals to come and help in monitoring the electoral process, for 2 particular reasons, which I think is very important for them to be invited, right? The first reason is that I think in my earlier speeches, I talk about how the government, or how the democracy we have, the electoral reforms that we have, or the electoral process is not in and of itself impartial. That means for you to get reforms that are probably going to happen, right? For you to get recommendations, because these individuals, when they come, aside from tallying the results, right, they give recommendations that should probably be followed. Unfortunately, the electoral commission and the government only adopt about 20% since the 2-5 referendum that happened. That means these individuals still have to be invited so that they give us recommendations of what we can do better as a country since we are learning. I beg to submit.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, our dear modulator. Ladies and gentlemen, without going any further, keeping myself rolling like a ball in the field, allow me go through the question on table. The question that has been asked, it was about the civil societies and international observers. As I told you, without bringing any thought of mine, or without bringing any allegations, coming with the actual facts documented, allow me go straight and tell you that before we go any further talking about civil societies, talking about international observers, do we really know any example of these international observers, or are we speaking out of the space? Before we go any further and we start saying international observers, they have to do this, like which international observer? Ladies and gentlemen, allow me put them onto your table. In international, I'm going to go straight away from each international observer with its role or responsibility towards the electoral process of Uganda. For example, we have international observers. For example, in 2001, we had the Commonwealth and the European Union. This is international observer who oversee the electoral processes of countries like Uganda. The Commonwealth and the European Union, they reported, or they made various reports according to the 2001 election. For example, they reported intimidation, misuse of security forces, and this helped international awareness of Uganda's dictatorship. Ladies and gentlemen, this will bring about, or this will bring to attention of world powers who are funding dictatorial regimes, as long as these international observers publicize or publish these conditions taking place in those countries. Allow me to keep the ball rolling by telling you that in 2006, we had the European Union and the African Union. Those are international observers. They observed issues and administrative improvements, but administrative improvements were noted. Look, of level playing, like in the issues which were observed by the European Union and the African Union, they say that during the 2006 elections, there were low levels of what? There were low levels of playing field. We are seeing the opposition being frustrated and giving much attention to the what? Giving much attention to the incumbent. Take an example. The very year 2006, Dr. Kizza Besigye, who was of the FDC, was several times arrested. For example, he was even charged of treason. He was charged of rape during the campaigns. He was imprisoned. But how are we going to come to our awareness? By the international observers like European Union coming this and documenting this to the entire nation. Ladies and gentlemen, without wasting any single minute of my time, allow me continue. In 2011, we had the Commonwealth.
Let me interrupt you briefly to hear from Marvin.
Thank you, Speaker. Do you actually believe that we have media groups that would also make the certain reports that we do not need international observers, then we have media groups that could do the same role?
You have a minute to respond and also to conclude your
Ladies
point.
and gentlemen, as if we had read my speech, because actually I was coming to that. He didn't wait me to complete my presentation. Allow me continue, because it's actually what I'm speaking about. So he's in accordance, or he's in conjuncture with me. Ladies and gentlemen, in 2011, so we had the Commonwealth and the African Union. They noted that polling sessions they raised concern about the vote buying, and the discredibility of the Electoral Commission. That was in 2011. 2016, so we had Commonwealth who reported the delays in the result transmission exercise, use of force, and lack of transparency. How are we knowing this? But through these international observers. Coming to his question, because it was summarized in my presentation. We have even civil societies in Uganda which were within our country. I started with international observers. But even civil societies in Uganda within, they're also making reports in the accordance of the irregularities that are noticed in the election process of Uganda. For example, we had the CCEDU. Are we together, my colleague? This is the civil society within Uganda. They have come up. We had the Uganda Joint Christian Council. This is a civil society within Uganda. They have come on board and told us that the irregularities which were noticed.
Thank you, Hamidu. Your time is up.
I rest my case.
May I now pose the fifth question to you, the speakers. In your assessment, do social attitudes of the electorate, for instance, ethnic biases and divisions, play a role in influencing electoral outcomes? In your assessment, do social attitudes of the electorate, for instance, ethnic biases and divisions, play a role in influencing electoral outcomes? We shall hear from Marvin first. You have 3 minutes strictly.
First of all, I'm just going to start with, I'm going to answer this question in two tenets. But the first tenet now looks at what happened in the 1961 elections, when now Buganda, 1961 is when Buganda now boycotted the election that was present. And its interests were simple, to have its representatives to the Legico selected directly from its Luchiko. So, now that aspect now correlates with what happened in the colonial governance. That Buganda had that supreme role, that Buganda was a supreme kingdom that had opportunity to now influence certain decisions. So, and how did that affect these other standards of other kingdoms? Because at the end of the day, we look at the referendum that happened in 1964 by Milton Obote's government that now brings back the lost counties by Bunyoro to Buganda. And Buganda had acquired these counties simply because it was a supreme kingdom. So now that already shows the influence that ethnic groups and ethnic biases have in the election system. Now, when it comes back to the second tenet,
I have to interrupt you, Marvin, to entertain a question or a point of information from Hamid. Quickly.
My dear honorable comrade, allow me first put this onto your table. 1961 that you've quoted, we didn't have the Legico in 1961, please. Collect yourself. 1961, we were electing members who are going to sit on the first parliament as we were preparing Uganda for the independence. Still the same year, Buganda didn't pick members from the Luchiko in 1961. Buganda boycotted the elections. Maybe you're speaking about another year. Maybe you're meaning 1962.
Now, I might not need to answer such a question, but this is simple. What I'm trying to talk about is the aspect of certain kingdoms now failing, influencing elections simply because they are supreme kingdoms. Now, the question that was posed does not look at what we have in our historical facts. I think the judges will have a conclusion on that. Now, what is much important is how this social attribute now correlates with how do these social attributes now affect the elections at the end of the day. In 2021, when we are voting members of parliament, the presidential candidates, you saw what happened to Masaka. Very red at the end of the day, just tied red. Simply because people are fighting interests of a kingdom, or people are fighting interests of, I belong to Uganda, I belong to Ankwele, so therefore should we send our leader at the end of the day. And that is not what an election looks at. An election is supposed to look at competence and look at leaders that are going to help at the end of the day, are going to help our societies, our countries, and not look at the aspect of social attributes like what is existent in the status quo.
Thank you, Marvin. Your time is up. Kasfa, you have 3 minutes to answer the question.
Okay, thank you so much. In my view, I think, yeah, the social attributes have had
social
attitudes. Yeah,
attitudes.
Yeah, they have. Yeah, they have played a role in influencing our electoral outcome. And how have they done this? Most of the people right now in Uganda are biased because of some tribes. Because the previous speakers were talking about back in time when we had Obote and Idi Amin Dada, and we saw that Kampala was dominated by their tribe mates, and it was more of a tribal area than of a capital city. And now it is now the same thing that most of Ugandans right now think that because we have the Banyankole president, now they feel like it is more in favor of the Banyankole. And now other tribes are like, now this is also a time for us to take our person in power. It has been evidenced even on media how people are so much biased and tired because of these tribal things. You find people saying, this time around we are going to vote this person because most of the big jobs are being taken up even by unqualified people because they belong to a certain tribe. And we have seen this evidence that even recently from UCAA, we saw people being fired because of having because of them being unqualified, but they were in places where they were not supposed to be, simply because maybe they were taken there by people they know, and because maybe of the tribal things and the nepotism in the country. So I think when we are voting, people come very biased. They already know that these people have offended us. It is even evidence that when you're walking in town and you're Mnyakore, I don't know if it is even written on your face. Someone just looks at you and they want to push the problems on you. They are already, they are that much biased that when you're bargaining, because it is very hard to speak Uganda perfectly when you're not a Muganda. So the moment you start speaking, they already notice your accent. And then, and they quote, I'm quoting this word, and you wonder, I'm also going through my own problems. Why are you now bringing yours to me? But it's just because of the mind they have, the biased mindset. And I call upon Ugandans that it is not the tribe leading the country. It is one president, and he's here for us all. Let people stop being biased. Go and vote someone that you see that is good for the country, not just because they belong to a certain tribe, because at the end of the day, we all need to be liberated as a country, not a certain tribe. If this country happens to have a problem, it is going to affect a Munyankore, a Mulango, a Muganda, and everyone in the country. No, and no one is going to left out saved. When COVID-19 came...
Your time is up. Kaspa?
Can I please summarize?
In 30 seconds.
Okay, thank you. I was saying that when COVID-19 came, it did not specify on who was favored. It affected all of us. So it is our role to erase this mindset and stop being biased. Vote for people who are credible enough. Thank you.
Calvin, you have 3 minutes to respond to the question.
2 minutes or 3?
3 minutes.
Thank you very much. First and foremost, I will articulate the question based on personal experience. From the past, in Milton Obote's regime, we are seeing that the Langi people dominated much. At the same time, when we look at the current presidency, it is evident that in many of the institutions, a certain tribe is also dominating. But the question in mind, we all have a common goal, and the common goal is democracy, free and fair elections, and democracy in the country to our fellows, not that. When I come to the personal experience, I happen to be with a certain friend. They told me that you guys, you are the ones, just like my previous speaker said, that you are the ones who have delayed much in power. You are dominating. When in actual sense, we are having a situation whereby people, individuals, we are judging based on appearance. I'm a person who is both a Langi and a Westerner. But because the appearance I took from the West, the person strictly sees that this person, you are the person who's taking much in the system. So, as Ugandans and the youth, let's not look onto the ethical attitudes of our fellows. We have a common goal. A common goal is democracy, free and fair elections. Once we do that, we shall overcome this. I so submit.
Thank you.
All right.
3 minutes.
3?
3 minutes.
All right. So I'm just going to be as fast as I can and talk about. The question says, do social attitudes of the electorate, like ethnic biases, influence electoral outcomes? I think yes, they do. Because let's just look at the various examples that are in the country, for example, right? Look at the people that are probably in West Nile. And they do this, they vote for individuals that are in political parties or high places simply because they have the co-ethnic patronage and loyalty that they attach to these individuals. It's very simple. The reason as to why probably the people in Bukedia will vote for Anita Among is basically for me because of 2 reasons. The first one is because she's from that side. And the second reason is that they ought to benefit somewhere or somehow from her being there, by virtue of the fact that she'll probably give you salt. She'll probably give you a bucket, and you are very happy about that. I think the attachment and the blind loyalty that we attach to these individuals, and because they are simply from our tribe, because they are simply from our side of the country, like the kind of blind loyalty that you see happening in West Nile. We have one General Moses Ali that can't leave parliament. He's still minister. Why? Because people choose to vote him and they push him to go there. And why do they push him to go there? Because they think they have someone who is probably in a ministerial position, who is probably in the NRM, NEC and all that, who can make them benefit somehow. And that is then a problem, because if that attitude continues to happen, then you don't vote leaders. Because I don't think for the next 5 years, the members that come from the constituency of the of the general are going to benefit in any way, because he is incapable of standing alone. That definitely means he can't deliver. If we continue voting people like that, it definitely means just because he is affiliated to your tribe or something, it means you're not going to have a government that is going to serve you. And this is like a call to the youth based on that. Don't make decisions simply because I have a Norbert Mao that we vote from the same polling station with, and then I'm going to vote him because he's from that side. No, I think we have to digest information. Don't look at probably the videos of a certain new presidential candidate dancing, and you're like, I want that to be my president. Read their manifestos, understand their
Thank you,
manifestos,
Kaka.
and
Your
then
time
make
is
a
up.
point, not because of ethnic groups or something. I rest.
Hamidu, you may respond in 3 minutes.
Thank you very much. May God enable me to utilize the 3 minutes today. The question you asked, as I re-echo it, you said, the question was, in your assessment, do social attitudes of the electorate, ethnic groups play a role?
Ethnic biases and divisions.
Ethnic biases play a role in influencing electoral outcome. I, as an individual, I would clearly say exactly, as the question is, social attitudes and ethnic biases highly create or highly influence the electoral outcome. For example, if I'm to dive back in the history, one should emphasize, how did we reach there? Where did the ethnic biases come from? This is originated from the first question we looked at, the colonial legacy. Ethnic biases originates from early along during the colonial era, before the independence. When Uganda was led under divide and rule, that's when we started seeing affiliations Baganda against Banyolo, Banyolo against the. So the ethnic biases originates from that time. It explains why the elections of the pre-independence or the post-independence were based on ethnic biases. When we come to the current affairs, ethnic biases has been witnessed. For example, in the elections, general elections of 2016, we saw His Excellency Yoweri Kaguta Museveni. Out of the 15, by the way, this election took place on 18th of February. Out of the 13 million registered voters, we saw His Excellency Museveni getting approximately 5 million votes. We saw Dr. Kizza Besigye getting approximately 3 million votes. But if we come and relate to the ethnic backgrounds, we are going to say, when you navigate where His Excellency Kizza Besigye of FDC at the time came from, in his home India, he led or he dominated. The votes were in favor of him. When you go to His Excellency Museveni in his home area, the votes were in favor of him. Let's come back to the current affairs. The previous elections of 2021, look, in the results of the election, out of the 18 million voters, we saw His Excellency Museveni getting 6 million votes. That is approximately 58.78%. We saw His Excellency Bobby Wine, His Excellency Kyagulanyi of the NUP getting 35.09%. That is 3 million votes. But if we trace, when you look at the
Calvin,
statistics of those elections.
Pass on the microphone to Calvin.
Thank you very much. How do the number of votes correspond with the ethical bias? Because I see we are talking about the bias and the ethical attitudes. Now, number of votes, how do they tally?
Kaka, you have a point as well? Okay, Hamidu, respond.
Thank you very much for that brilliant.
Conclude in a minute.
Thank you very much for that brilliant question. How I guess you were attentive, you would have got what I was explaining. Because on the very first, I'm not attractive, I'm just bringing up my point. On the very first, we are going to, I said, out of the 18 million voters who were registered, we got 6 million votes approximately of His Excellency Museveni. We got 3 million votes of Kizza Besigye. And I emphasize the point that from the region where His Excellency Besigye of the FDC at the time comes from, he dominated the results. All results were in favor of him. This is ethnic biases. So everyone is voting according to homeland or according to ethnicity. Look at the 2021 elections. Buganda was highly in support of Bobby Wine, His Excellency Kyagulanyi of NUP. This is ethnic biases. Baganda saying we are voting our fellow Baganda. Westerners are saying we are voting our fellow Westerner. That is ethnic biases, and it's influencing results in the general election. Ladies and gentlemen, I think I'm very clear enough to that point.
Thank you, Hamidu. And with that marks the end of the third panel session. For this evening, I now... No plenary. May I now invite the judges to make their comments and also disseminate the results of this debate performance. So the judges have requested for a break of 2 minutes to deliberate and tally the results. Okay. Let us just take 2 quick questions. May I see the placard? Makerere University, please, field your question. To your preferred speaker.
My question is for the gentleman. I didn't get his name or his university, but I did get his opinion.
Hamidu?
Yes, him. So, the ability of a country or a state to actualize depends on its capacity to protect its superiority. One of the major factors that govern or that exist within superiority is institutional effectiveness. The extent to which you most likely depend on these civil society organizations means that you directly or unidirectionally weaken these sort of institutions that act as checks and balance systems for these particular countries. You argue that you want to protect democratic principles. It's hard for you as a country to protect democratic principles, the extent to which you depend on other forms of democracy or other countries. My question is then, how do you most likely ensure effectiveness or institutional effectiveness to warrant that sort of superiority and protection of your democratic principles as a country when there's a large dependency on civil society organizations? How do you expect Uganda to become like a liberal democracy like the United States of America?
Thank you for your question. Let us take one from Uganda Pentecostal University. Please state the panelists you're directing your question to.
Thank you so much. My name is Sadrak Okuja, and my submission is deriving from Kaka's arguments on question 4. Question 4 checked on the relevancy of civil society organizations. It is my observation that he made a statement that is dead on mention by saying that the Electoral Commission has a reserved right to either have civil society organizations participate in these elections or not. I would love to respectfully invoke his conscience to the laws under Section 16 of the Electoral Commission Act, Cap 176, and furthermore corroborate that with the Electoral Commission Regulations of Observers 2016, and submit that the laws mandate civil society organizations and international organizations to observe, and numbers not limited, and as such, it has a qualitative
30
effect.
seconds, please. Ask
It
the
has
question.
a qualitative effect on the transparency of the election at the end of the day. Question to him in regards that, are you submitting to this house that it is relevant to act out of law in case there is one?
Thank you. Thank
I
you for
so
your question.
submit.
Thank you. May the speakers respond. Your question was fielded to who? Okay. Hamidu, you may respond first.
But before, I would kindly request, because the question is very broad, I would kindly request her in 3 minutes, like in a second, to summarize the question.
In a minute, please, strictly respond to the question.
No, as in I was requesting her to summarize for me the question. Words were very many. Ideal, I didn't pick.
In 30 seconds, can you repeat the question?
My question was, how do you expect Uganda to develop and protect its superiority when it's dependent on civil society organizations, in simple terms?
In a minute, Hamid.
Thank you very much. The question is well understood now. Now, the question you're asking, that when I'm depending on civil societies, my dear Honorable, remember, the question was asking, where I came into the civil societies, we were answering the questions that was saying, or that was asking about the roles of the civil societies in that line. So I was trying to explain to you how the civil societies have contributed, or how they have influenced the electoral processes in Uganda. Then, coming to your very very last question. You say, how shall we promote institutionalism? For example, when in my presentation I told you, we're having weak institutions in Uganda. Starting from the Electoral Commission, it's very weak. Starting from the UPDF, we're having various weak institutions in the country. But this comes as a result of the loopholes which were put in the Constitution. And I want you to emphasize this. We are not blaming the 1995 Constitution. It was perfect. The amendments that has been done, or the amendments that have been carried out in the process, they have changed the Constitution in favor of one individual.
Thank you, Hamid, for your response. So pass on the microphone to Kaka to respond to his question.
I think we do legal reforms.
Thank you. Thank you.
I think my response is going to be very simple to that question, right? The relevancy to act out of law. On quote, I said, and this when I was talking about international observers, is when I said the 1995 Constitution, Article 61 in bracket 2, the Commission may invite international observers. That means they reserve the right international observers. There is no mention of me saying that they ought to invite civil society organizations. No, civil society organizations can help in conducting accountability and the rest of that. From the quote I make, I talk about international observers. I hope your question is answered. Thank you very much.
Thank you, my panelists, for your able participation for this session, and thank you, our audience, for your participation and your patience. May I now invite Council Aboneka to come and make his remarks and also announce the results of this debate panel.
All right, thank you very much. Could we please give them a round of applause? It's not easy being here. And I want to thank CCG and everyone who has participated. Debate is very important. I now have 2 minutes and I'm going to use them. The first time I boarded a plane leaving Uganda and connecting to another plane was because I was going to debate, and that I was going to carry the Uganda flag. So debate is a thing, yeah? So it's a good thing, so don't take it lightly. So before I go to the marks, I want to say that the debate was interesting. It being an afternoon, but we were entertained. At the same time, given some mind-bubbling discussions. I want to correct about 3 things. One, about the translation of the Constitution, because it's dear to me. We actually have an ongoing case in court about that. Article 4 is clear that the state must translate. So it is very clear. And so pray for us. The case is since 2019. We are still in court. We won round 1, and we hope that we will win the entire case. The other one is the involvement of the army. I know most of you quoted the functions of the army in politics, but I think the question was about how far should the army be involved in elections, okay? And I think someone said that there is no law which stops the army from involving in politics or in elections. Again, not all of us are lawyers, but definitely the EPDF Act, even the Electoral Commission Act, prevents the army, public servants. Now these are the questions we've been asking. This one I can say it, I have been saying it. If Chris Obore, for example, is a public servant and is busy kissing posters of Anita Mong and doing all these things, isn't he going against the law? All right? So those are some of the questions that we need to talk about. So even the army, the Constitution says the army may be invited, but for emergencies and the rest, is an election an emergency? You know, those are very interesting questions, and I know that Dr. Sarah is very passionate about this thing. Doesn't want anything green in a polling station, apart from the grass. So, so those are some of the discussions I thought I needed to put across. Lastly, is the issue of the use of the observer reports. And I think most of you have used them, which is a very good thing, especially Kaka. It's always good to not descend in the arena of generalities, generally, because we want to know what. And most of you would speak about an issue and do not go deep into it to show us the how. How has civil society played their role? So the how is also important while you're doing that. But generally, we had a very interesting debate, and I want to thank you. Normally, in a debate, there are very interesting words. That could be for another day, but I like the question of, I think it was my colleague, from MOOBS, that it is not a tribe leading the country, it is one person. Very interesting. Okay, so, ladies and gentlemen, in number 5, at 64% is Uganda Pentecostal University. In number 4, with 65%, that's Muteesa Royal One University. In position 3, can you guess? MOOBS, that's now MOOBS University at 66%. And in position 2, Bishop Stuart University at 67%. And in position 1, Kyambogo University at 77%. So thank you very much. Just lastly, please debaters, pay attention. One of the score parts is about presentation, smartness, and all that kind of stuff. So there's marks for that. So be aware. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Council. May I call the House to order? We are going to take a healthy break of 5 minutes, stretch a bit, have some tea at the back, and thereafter we resume with the final round of